Hey guys, so here's part 2 of the 5.4 day 2 notes. We are once again solving polynomial equations by factoring. Okay, notice here we have m cubed plus 6m squared minus 4m minus 24. Remember, when we are having a cubed and we have 4 terms, this is how we're going to factor by grouping. Now notice here this is set equal to 0, so we're good to go. Now let's determine how many solutions we should get at the end. Well, our degree here is 3, since we are in standard form, and that is the highest or largest exponent. So remember, factor by grouping, that means we take the first 2 terms and group that, and then we take the last 2 terms and group. Notice we have a minus in front of the 4m. That means we need to include it in our grouping. Okay, so the m cubed plus 6m squared, we see they have an m squared in common, so I'm left with m plus 6. Remember, when we have that minus or negative in front of that term, we need to take it out, so I need to take out. Notice 4m and the 24 have a 4 in common. Now I'm left with m. Don't forget, we should actually have a plus here and 6, because if we redistributed that negative 4 to the 6, that would give us negative 24. And don't forget that these 2 factors have to be the same. Okay, now we're going to put this together. So now we have m squared. So remember, we take our m squared and the negative 4, put that together, and then our m plus 6. Don't forget, we don't make that m plus 6 squared because we are actually distributing the m squared to both the m and plus 6. So if we FOIL this back out, that's what we're doing. And that's the same thing with the negative 4. We're distributing or multiplying it just by m and the 6. Okay, now let's see if we can factor a little bit more. Notice m squared minus 4. This is a difference of squares because we have a binomial. There's a subtraction, and our a and c values, they are perfect squares. So I do 2 sets of my parentheses, and then we know m plus 6. m plus 6 we cannot factor anymore because that is a linear expression. Linear expressions, we can't factor more. Okay, we have m and n. Let's take the square root of 4, which is 2. Remember, we have 1 plus, 1 minus. Now we set each of our factors equal to 0. So I have m plus 2 equal to 0, m minus 2 equal to 0, and m plus 6 equal to 0. So I'm left with n equals negative 2, n equals 2, and n equals negative 6. Let's count to make sure we got 3 solutions. Okay, so m equals negative 2. That's 1, n equals 2 is another, and n equals negative 6, that's the third. So we did this correctly. Okay, let's go ahead and do example 4. I would like you guys to actually go ahead and pause the video and try example 4 on your own. Okay, let's see what you got. So notice here, once again, we have 4 terms, and our largest exponent is a 3. This means we are going to factor by grouping. Now, this is already set equal to 0, so let's see how many solutions we're going to have. Notice that our degree is 3, since the exponent 3 is the largest or highest exponent, and this is in standard form. So we'll have 3 solutions. Okay, so now let's go ahead. We've grouped the first 2 set of parentheses. Notice that there is a positive or plus sign in front of these 6, so we really don't need to include it into our grouping here. Okay, so 2x cubed and the plus x squared, they only have an x squared in common, so we're left with 2x. Don't forget, when you take the whole thing out, you are left with a 1. Because if you don't have that 1 and we just do x squared times 2x, that only gives us 2x cubed. So always multiply it back out if you're unsure of your answer. Now the 6x plus 3, we know we have to have the addition sign. That's going to stay. And a 3 is in common, so we have 2x, once again, plus 1 equals 0 here. Okay, so now we take the x squared and the 3, we put that together. And then we have the 2x plus 1. Remember, that should be exactly the same factor. If not, rethink your work. Now let's see if we can factor any more. Well, let's look at the x squared plus 3. Well, notice first we have an addition and in a number that is not a perfect square. So that means we cannot factor this anymore. 2x plus 1. Well, unfortunately, this is a linear expression, so we can't factor it. So that means we're just going to set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So I have x squared plus 3 equals 0 and 2x plus 1 equal to 0. Okay, on the first one, I subtract the 3, and now I take the square root. Okay? Don't forget, anytime you take the square root, you always have 2 solutions. Now let's look at the 3 inside. Notice we have a negative. What happens when we have negative numbers and we take the square root? Well, that's where we are going to have to deal with I. Now with the 3, is that a perfect square? No. Is there a perfect square that goes into 3? No. So we're going to leave it inside that square root. So my final answer here, remember, square root of -1, and you might need to write this down, is equal to I. So we are going to have imaginary solutions, which that is totally fine if that occurs. So we have plus minus I square root of 3. Okay? And make sure if you do get imaginary, write in standard form. Remember, standard form is that A plus BI or A minus BI. Okay? And so here, the I is going to go in front of the square root sign because just with the aesthetics like. So we don't want the I behind because we can never tell if it's underneath or not underneath the square root. So always make sure it's in front of that square root. Okay? Okay, so now let's solve for the other one. I subtract 1 and then divide by 2, so I get -1/2. Now let's count to make sure we get 3 solutions. Well, -1/2, that is 1. And then don't forget the plus minus represents 2 solutions. We have positive I squared of 3 and negative I squared of 3. So we do get 3 solutions. Okay, make sure you watch the last part of our 5.4 day 2.